Your Excellencies, other members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of government, private sector, although I'm not seeing our private sector representatives yet, academia, non-governmental organization, friends all, good morning, bonjour. Come on, we're a small group, we have to get the energy going. Good morning. Good morning. Wonderful. The IICA Delegation in Canada welcomes you to our annual partners meeting. Bienvenidos y buenos días. As many of you know, our IICA delegations throughout the hemisphere, all 34 countries, we host what is known as our accountability seminar each year, or Rendición de Cuentas. It is usually a much anticipated event throughout our hemisphere, and it allows us to share our triumphs as well as our tribulations with you, our partners, as we travel the arduous road towards achieving sustainable, productive, and competitive agriculture. Those of us who were present last week at the CSIRF, the Canadian International Food Security Research Fund closing ceremony and heard the projects that have been implemented with in collaboration, a collaborative event between the Global Affairs Canada and IDRC would have been heartened, would have been inspired. I think it set the stage for this meeting because we see that there are lessons to be learned, there are lessons to be transferred, and there is hope as we tackle the challenges. This year's event, friends, is a bit different as we transition from one programming period to another. Also, we start a new administration, a new medium-term plan under the leadership of a new Director General, Dr. Manuel Otero. And you will be hearing from Manuel shortly. As you will note from the agenda provided, our program will present highlights of our work and results over the last 4 years, the last programming period, and importantly, share our new medium-term plan for 2018 to 2022. And I emphasize our, because this was not prepared in isolation. In order to prepare the medium-term plan, there were consultations at every level, sub-regional, national, regional, individual. We had surveys, we had online responses, we had meetings such as these. Our Director General actually came to Canada and had several high-level meetings. And what we heard is reflected in the medium-term plan. So it's our plan. In this session, I'm going to seek further assistance that we need now to hone this plan, to take from this plan what the delegation of IICA here in Canada can do to make sure that we have the inputs, the results, the expectations of our Canadian stakeholders met. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Audia Barnett, and I'm the representative for the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture in Canada. I'm joined by my team, we call ourselves the Fantastic Four. I'm joined by my team, Lindsay, Lindsay, stand up, you're so small, so people can see you. Okay, our technical cooperation specialist, that's Lindsay, Isabel Giroux, our office manager, and Gloria Ramirez, our administrative assistant. And Gloria is manning the door there. Yes, thank you. So it is our distinct pleasure. And we have Ephraim who joined us. We have our sole male who joined to help with this event. So thank you so much to the team. It is our distinct pleasure to host you for this, our 2018 annual accountability seminar. We recognize the demands on your time and really appreciate that you have accepted our invitation to spend the morning with us. We know that you'll make meaningful contributions to the development of an implementable strategy for IICA in Canada. Es un gran placer para nosotros recibirlos en nuestro seminario de rendición de cuentas y los invitamos a participar activamente. We encourage you to invest the next few hours that you see on the agenda, reflected in the agenda, and this agenda has been prepared with you in mind, so we expect you to participate fully. At this time, I want to note that we have a presentation from our Director General who was not able to be with us this morning. But before I introduce the Director General, I want to note that you have a program and you have some papers on your table. I want to just bring them to your attention. The Slido. And this is an app that you can download very, very easily on your phone. We also have Wi-Fi, and that is indicated on the Slido paper. For Slido, we'll be doing some polls, and the polls will be used throughout the morning's event to just help us to get a finger on the pulse and how you're feeling. So I want to encourage you to participate fully and use the tools that we have provided for you. We also have a summary of our achievements from 2017. We note that we have challenges, and it's very sobering when we see the FAO's State of Food Security and Nutrition World Report that was released a few weeks ago, and the situation we are having in terms of world hunger. It's going up. As I mentioned, the event last week with CSERF gave me personally some hope, but we know that we have a lot of work to be done in the hemisphere. We want to assure you and reassure you that IICA is in it for the long haul, and we look to you as our partners. At this time, I hope you have all downloaded the Slido. I want you to download Slido because we want to do a poll, and we want to make sure it is working. All right, so download Slido, and at the same time, I want to remind you, as we did last year, and I think a couple of years, we'll be doing tweets. We want you to tweet as much as possible, and we'll give a prize for the person who has done the most tweets. And I see the winner from last year here, and I'm sure that we'll have some competition going there. So Slido, let's test it. Slide poll number 1. Okay, it is how many times have you attended the IICA Canada's annual meeting? 0, 1, 2, 3, or more than 3. So if it's on your, once you download the app, it's supposed to be coming up, oh, okay. So once you download the app, you can actually indicate, and we will look at that in a minute. So you can continue with persons who were a little slow in downloading the app. I'll give you a little time. So let's move on with the agenda. As I mentioned, we have a new Director General, and he's based in Costa Rica with over 25 years experience at IICA. He worked with IICA for over 25 years prior to taking up the position as Director General. He's a veterinarian and holds also 2 master's degrees, one in agricultural science as well as in agricultural development sciences. He strongly believes in agricultural development as the pulse for the SDGs. And he feels that if we can bring people together, we can overcome the triple challenge of being equitable, sustainable, and competitive. He really wanted to be with us. As I mentioned, Canada was the first country he visited after becoming Director General, but he sends his apologies and a short message. So at this time, I'm going to ask for the video of the Director General's speech.
I want to thank initially to the distinguished members of the Diplomatic Corps, government, private sector, NGOs, and academy. Let me say also the total coincidence between the title of the event with the strategic objective of IICA. When we think in enhancing the agri-food trade and development for the Americas, we are expressing the historic mandate of IICA. We are convinced that our hemisphere has a unique opportunity for becoming a key actor for ensuring food security and worldwide sustainability. IICA belongs to the member countries, and as such, our programs reflect the priorities that the member countries identify. This is why in the new medium-term plan recently approved, key issues proposed by Canada, such as trade and integration, gender, food safety, indigenous, technology, and innovation were included. The new map road that IICA has approved is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. In this regard, I want to recognize the progress and the leadership made by Canada regarding the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. IICA offers the possibility to work with the Canadian government for producing a multiplier effect in the hemisphere. Before concluding these remarks, I would like to underscore key words of the strategy that IICA is launching, such as strategic alliances, South-South cooperation, and networking. For doing that, I am absolutely convinced that the involvement of Canadian partners is extremely relevant. I wish you the best.
General, and at this time, if we could see the poll results. The poll results. While we get the poll results up, the Director General spoke about partnerships and the importance, and it's something that IICA has been able to do throughout the hemisphere for many years, and it's part of our success story. And in Canada here, we have close working relationship with the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada ministry. And as such, we are delighted this morning that we have with us Erin Fowler, who is pretty new to his role, and he, and many of you will love to hear this. He is the Chief Agriculture Negotiator, and we know that you have had some challenges over the last many months. But he previously spent his career at Global Affairs Canada, which he joined in 2002. Erin served most recently as Executive Director of Tariffs and Market Access at GAC, in which capacity he was co-lead negotiator for goods and lead negotiator for energy in the NAFTA modernization negotiations. So we have a VIP amongst our midst. From 2014 to 2016, Erin was the Director and Deputy Chief Negotiator for Softwood Lumber, and you know that had its own challenges. And from 2010 to 2014, Erin served as Council of Market Access at Canada's permanent mission to the World Trade Organization in Geneva. There he was Canada's lead Negotiator at the conclusion of talks to finalize the WTO agreement on trade facilitation. Erin holds a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from the University of New Brunswick and a Master of Arts in International Affairs from Carleton University. And while Erin makes his way to the podium, I will just take a quick look at the poll, and we see that we have lots of newcomers. Welcome. 43% 0. Okay, followed by more than 3. So we need the old timers. And no emphasis on old, but we need you to make the newcomers feel welcome. Welcome to all those persons who are joining us for the very, very first time. And as I say that, I want you to welcome Mr. Fowler to provide greetings on behalf of the Government of Canada.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barnett, for your kind introduction and for the invitation to speak this morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Erin Fowler. I am Canada's new Chief Agriculture Negotiator. I am very happy to be in a meeting where I am not going to be negotiating today. Really very, very happy. I'm here on behalf of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, which is the Government of Canada lead for working with IICA. And I'm very pleased to express the Government of Canada's appreciation for IICA and for its work and to contribute to your conversations here this morning. We greatly value this work and its contribution to strengthening the agriculture sector throughout the Americas. Our hope is that this morning's deliberations can inform IICA's work in the future and strengthen IICA's engagement with Canada. IICA is a unique international organization, and it stands out because of its strong technical expertise. Throughout the Americas, IICA is a leader in working on the ground with farmers and other agricultural experts. Agriculture Canada recognizes the significant value of IICA's work to build capacities, to meet food safety standards, share impartial information about innovations like biotechnology, and strengthen agriculture's contribution to economic growth and rural life in the Americas. From Canada's point of view, IICA's technical expertise and work is needed now more than ever. As you know, and as Dr. Barnett mentioned in her opening remarks, recently the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations reported that globally, the number of food insecure people has risen for the third year in a row. And the prevalence of food insecurity is higher amongst women, with the largest differences in the world reported in Latin America. The FAO further reports that the total number of undernourished in South America has been rising since 2012. And the majority of poor and undernourished, as we know, are rural people. The only way the world will achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 1, no poverty, and Sustainable Development Goal number 2, zero hunger, is if farmers are able to earn better incomes and escape poverty themselves. Agriculture also has a critical role to play in achieving other Sustainable Development Goals, including SDG number 5, gender equality, and SDG number 8, decent work and economic growth. Agriculture is also important in the context of environmental sustainability. The relationship between climate change and agriculture is a crucial one. Today, Latin America and the Caribbean export food around the world. But climate change is forecast to have a major impact on production, and this will have consequences for farmers' incomes. As the climate changes, production patterns will change. In addition, there will be changes in the incidence and prevalence of pests and diseases. These challenges highlight why we need an organization like IICA. Likewise, from Agriculture Canada's point of view, we believe that more can be done to facilitate trade in agricultural goods. Forums to share experiences and information about regulatory systems and standards for food safety and plant health make it a useful and important contribution. IICA can provide impartial, evidence-based information to farmers and to governments to help them make smart decisions for their agricultural sectors. We're also aware that IICA has done exceptional work in promoting the participation of women in agriculture, including improving economic opportunities and supporting rural women's leadership and decision-making. IICA's networks and technical expertise can also support efforts to build capacity and help countries achieve more with their agricultural sectors. Our input today can help strengthen IICA's work to help face these global challenges. So best of luck to all of us as we discuss and deliberate this morning. This is very important work. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Erin. It seems that you were with the department for a while. Well, thank you so much, and I think you're spot on in your comments, so I want to thank you. At this time, it is my pleasure to invite Lindsay, our Technical Cooperation Specialist, to share with you highlights on our activities and achievements over the last programming period, 2014 to 2018.
Well, thank you all very much for being here. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to take you through a few of the highlights from IICA Canada's work over the last 4 years for our last medium-term plan. So, back in 2014, IICA Canada conducted a consultation with our Canadian stakeholders and really tried to identify what the priorities for Canadian stakeholders would be in terms of IICA's work over the coming 4 years. A number of different priorities were identified, and these include things like access to markets, agricultural health and food safety, supporting the development and implementation of international standards, such as Codex Alimentarius, the development of commodity supply chains across the Americas, and really promoting collaboration in research towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. After looking at these priorities, the delegation really identified 3 main areas of work that they were hoping to focus on in the next 4 years. The first one was identifying opportunities and proposing technical cooperation projects with partners to obtain mutual benefits in agriculture and food security. And really the key words there are mutual benefits. The delegation felt that it was very important that any projects that are undertaken by the delegation are mutually beneficial both to Canada and to other member countries of IICA. The second priority was improving the agricultural technical capability of the other member countries of the Institute by responding to technical cooperation requests, carrying out projects, and collaborating in research. The third area is maintaining the interest and support of the Canadian government and other local players in IICA's contributions to the hemisphere. And this is really critical. Canada is the 3rd largest quota contributor to IICA, and so it's very important that the Canadian government and Canadian stakeholders can really see themselves in the work of IICA and can really see the benefits of continuing to be involved in IICA. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these areas of work, and I'm going to pull out just a few examples. There's so many things I could tell you about, but I've chosen just a few highlights from the last 4 years. So under the first area of work, which is identifying opportunities for mutual benefits in agriculture and food security, the first example I'd like to tell you about is our Research and Internship Assistance Program. And this is a long-standing program in the delegation in Canada. And the goal of this program is really to provide small amounts of funds to researchers and agricultural professionals that are working across the Americas, including in Canada, to internationalize their research and to promote collaboration. Over the 4 years, we had 17 awards that were given to participants. 61% of those participants were female, and they came from a variety of different countries across the hemisphere, from Canada, Uruguay, Colombia, Argentina, Mexico, Trinidad, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Jamaica. And it's really interesting because in this program, there's a huge variety of different types of projects that people work on. Anything from finding new biological control agents for invasive species to looking at cow social behaviors on dairy farms. Another example I'd like to highlight is what we call our Small Ruminant Initiative. This initiative was really born out of a trip to the Caribbean Week of Agriculture in 2013 in Guyana, where several different members of the Canadian dairy goat industry were able to visit the Caribbean Week of Agriculture and make some great connections with people in the small ruminants sector in the Caribbean. And they found that there was a lot of interest in the Caribbean in Canadian genetics for dairy production. And so over the years, this initiative has been building. Some of the farmers from the Caribbean were able to come and visit breeders here in Canada. And in this past year, we have put in a funding proposal to develop a nucleus herd of goats with Canadian dairy goat production genetics, as well as the resilient genetics that are already existing in Jamaica. So we're excited to see where this collaboration will continue to go. Another example I'd like to highlight is a project that was completed in 2017 that was funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada. And the goal of this was really to support the Caribbean network of food safety focal points that are a part of InfoSan under the World Health Organization. And as I'm sure you can imagine, the people who occupy the roles of the focal points are very busy and are often being pulled in many different directions. And so the goal of this project was really to conduct a needs assessment for the network to enhance the functioning of the network in the Caribbean countries so that the focal points could successfully identify and share information on emerging food safety issues that are occurring in the Caribbean. In order to do this, we had Thank you. I woke up with a bit of a sore throat this morning, so this is actually very appreciated. Okay. That's great. Alrighty. So in order to conduct this project, we hired a Canadian researcher who works on group concept mapping. And what this is it's an objective way to identify priorities and issues that are being faced in a group and to prioritize how to move forward to fix those problems. So after conducting this exercise, really what we found was that the network really was strengthened because they had a better idea of what the challenges were that they were facing and how they could move forward to fix them. So now I'm going to move on to the second main area of work, which is improving the agricultural technical capability of other member countries of the Institute. And the example that I'd like to highlight for this area of work is a project that was completed in 2016 and 2017, looking at value-added opportunities for small-scale cacao producers in the Dominican Republic and Peru. And the goal of this project was really to promote opportunities to generate additional income for families that are in the cacao sector by enhancing the value of cocoa products through the value chain and expanding commercial opportunities. And really importantly, this project really focused on trying to help women to be involved in that value-added aspect. So I'm going to go through a few of the results from that project just very quickly. A case study was conducted of a women's cooperative in the Dominican Republic that was already functioning and already producing value-added products very successfully. So based on that case study, a business model was created that could be used by other cooperatives. And this business plan was shared with a cooperative in Peru called Oro Verde. And In order to help the cooperative to identify more market opportunities, a report was done on the Canadian cocoa market to identify export opportunities. A virtual financial fair was hosted in order to help to connect cooperatives with potential investors, and multiple training courses were developed specifically targeting women for the cooperative members in Peru. And one other aspect of that was that women who were involved in Peru were able to actually travel to the Dominican Republic to really get to see and experience the work that those women were doing. So I can tell you all about the great things about this project, but actually we have a video here from one of the women who was involved in the project, and I'll let her tell you what it meant to her.
Mi nombre es David Riate Guituanama. Me siento muy orgullosa de ser socia de la cooperativa Oro Verde que se encuentra en Lamas. Soy socia de Oro Verde porque constantemente somos beneficiados con capacitaciones, con prácticas también en las parcelas. Me siento muy orgullosa también que IICA haya permitido que nosotros viajemos a la República Dominicana, solventando ellos los gastos de estadía para que nosotros estemos más capacitados y veamos en esos lugares cómo también existen mujeres emprendedoras, que trabajan de la mano con sus esposos, que trabajan de la mano con su cooperativa. Y eso a nosotros nos motiva también a nosotros de formar nuestras pequeñas empresas y trabajar juntos con nuestros esposos, socios. Y es así que nosotros estamos organizados aquí en la provincia del Dorado en comités donde hombres y mujeres trabajamos y conocemos muy bien cómo trabajamos el cacao y cómo lo vamos a procesar. Querido amigo que nos está entrevistando, me siento de veramente orgullosa de la cooperativa, porque gracias a esas visitas que nosotros hemos realizado, ya podemos nosotros elaborar nuestros chocolates. Es así que nosotros nos reunimos constantemente para preparar chocolates de diferentes sabores con nuestro cacao orgánico que nosotros mismos producimos. De eso estoy muy agradecida a la cooperativa y también a IICA, quien en todo momento también viene capacitándonos, dándonos orientaciones, y no solamente para uno, sino también nosotros hacer la réplica. Y eso es lo que hemos hecho cuando nosotros hemos venido de República Dominicana. Hemos reunido a las mujeres en Oro Verde de todas las provincias y les hemos hecho la réplica de todas las experiencias que nosotros hemos tenido en República Dominicana. Después de todas esas visitas, nosotros nos hemos reunido un grupo de mujeres para elaborar también chocolates, porque ya contamos con un laboratorio para elaborar chocolates en la cooperativa de Lamas, y gracias a IICA, quien nos ha proporcionado este laboratorio para que nosotros, las mujeres de los socios de la cooperativa Oro Verde, podamos realizar estas prácticas ahí con ayuda de profesionales. Gracias a Oro Verde y muchas gracias a cada uno de ustedes.
Great. I think that her passion for her work is self-evident. All right, so now I'm going to move on to the third area of work that I mentioned earlier, which is maintaining the interest and support of the Canadian government and other stakeholders. We do this every single day in the office in various different ways. One of the things that we have been doing a lot in recent years is helping to share information, sometimes at the request of various government departments. For example, when the CFIA put out their new Safe Food for Canadians Act, we, in collaboration with the CFIA, held several different information sharing sessions with member countries and diplomatic missions in order to help them to understand how this new act was going to affect exporting countries. And these sessions were attended by more than 200 different participants, and we were very excited to be able to be involved in that. We also often conduct trainings or webinars on science-based decision-making in Latin America on a variety of topics, from biotechnology to invasive species to international negotiations. In 2018, the delegation joined the Food Security Policy Group, which is a Canadian coalition of NGOs that is working towards food security in the developing world. And this has been a great way for us to connect with NGOs that are working on the ground in a lot of other countries. So another example I'd like to tell you about is a bit of a unique project that we have had going on for the last few years in the office. The goal of this project was really to look at whether there was a possibility to transfer knowledge between people who are working in the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program here in Canada and their home local farming communities. As many of you probably know, Jamaica is a major source country for people who are involved in the SOP program, and so it was chosen as a potential pilot program for this knowledge transfer work. So a study was conducted in Jamaica to determine if there was interest amongst the people in Jamaica to be involved in such a pilot program. And in this study, there were farmers, government officials, social workers, and SOP workers themselves that were all involved, and all of them really felt like there was a lot of value to be found in such a project, because through the SOP program, a lot of workers really gain a lot of important agricultural skills. So we have developed a concept note, and we will be looking for funding to start a new pilot program in Jamaica in the near future. Lastly, I'd just like to say that engaging our partners really is a key part of our work, and so thank you all for being here again. We do this in a variety of different ways, from having regular meetings with our government officials at Global Affairs Canada and Agriculture Canada and the CFIA. We also conduct special consultations. Many of you were involved in the consultations earlier this year on the new medium-term plan, so thank you for your input into that. And we also engage with policymakers on a variety of different levels, from technical people working on the ground all the way up to politicians through participating in lobby days, for example, on Parliament Hill. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your participation, and I will pass it back to Dr. Burnett.
I should have mentioned that Lindsay's day job, no, not really. Lindsay comes from the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So she's on a transfer. We do an exchange every couple of years with IICA. So some of the activities she shared here are pretty new to Lindsay too. So I think she did a really good job. Well, in terms of the questions, maybe I'll have to field some of them. But Lindsay, you don't get away so easily. So while you think of one or two questions, I want to see the second poll question. And we should mention, and Lindsay shared, as she mentioned, we couldn't have shared all the activities that we did over the last 4 years, but she picked some gems out, and there's lots more information if you need to hear or to read about the specific projects. So this poll question: which of IICA's current program areas are best aligned with current priorities of the Canadian agri-food sector? So I want you to fill out those, do that poll, and I need One or two questions? Please, Don. And there's a mic there, I hope it's on.
So thank you very much, Lindsay. Don Buckingham from CAPI. It's wonderful to have an update to see what the priorities were and how the priorities were met and the real specificities. And I'm sure we're going to be talking more about this later when we move forward. But I wondered if you could give us any sense of where IICA is in collaborating with the Government of Canada on some of the agenda items with respect to the Barton Report and the future growth in Canada. And one that comes particularly to mind, we haven't spent a lot of time on it on CAPI, but I'm getting a lot of calls about it, is with respect to seasonal workers and whether or not there's a dialogue that goes both ways. I think it's very important that we look at how that dialogue is developing so that skills that are learned in Canada can be transmitted back to states and countries where the workers are coming from. But is there also an initiative with respect to dialogue about how the Canadian program can be improved so that the exchange, both in terms of actual employment opportunities, can be better tailored to the seasonal workers that are coming to Canada and then going back home? So I'm wondering about the two-way dialogue and how that is playing itself out and whether that's currently being looked at or it's going to be looked at, or it's figured very prominently in the Agri-Food expert table that just filed their report about 2 weeks ago, that seasonal labor is one of the big tickets. There's a real lack in Canada. So if you could just comment on that, thanks.
Okay. Thanks for that question, Don. And let me start with the seasonal workers program. I see Janet here, and you don't get off I'm going to ask you to help me here, Janet. Okay, so as Lindsay had pointed out, we started the project a few years back when we did a desk research in collaboration with the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council as well as University of Guelph, just to look at the seasonal agricultural workers program and see what were some of the attributes in terms of knowledge. We were interested in the knowledge transfer area. When we saw the opportunities there, then we went and drilled down a bit. And Mexico has a lot more workers than Jamaica, but Jamaica was a low-hanging fruit, so to speak. And we did that study in Jamaica. As a result of that study, and Lindsay pointed out all the cohort and all the groups that comprise that cohort, we realized that there are opportunities for what you're just saying there, for Canadian workers to benefit also from this knowledge. We can prepare them in the home country, and they could also benefit there. We found a case in Mexico wherein there was a farmer who was associated with a Canadian farm for, I think, up to 5 years. He went back to Mexico, established his farm, and he started in collaboration with the Canadian farmer producing when they were out of season. So there are opportunities for win-win, not just in terms of knowledge, but in terms of the economic benefits. But Janet is here from CARC, and I'm going to ask Janet because she's very up to date. I think last week there's a sitting of Parliament that maybe you could also speak to. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Janet Creighton from Canadian Ag HR Council. So we've been working in partnership with IICA, as well as the industry, who are all members of the Agriculture and Agri-Food Value Chain Roundtables. They're the ones who presented their recommendations, which were adopted in the new Industry Canada report, which you're referring to for the Agri-Food strategic economic table work. And so a lot of the issues with the program were highlighted of what needs to be fixed for the farmers. So that is the work of the value chain roundtables as well as the labor task force. What IICA has been focusing on is the unique relationship with the seasonal agriculture worker program, the workers and the employers, and what they're learning in Canada, modern agriculture production strategies, and how they can improve their own agriculture practices in their home countries. And so CARC has been highly supportive of the work, as well as the farmers and the Canadian Horticulture Council. They all participated in interviews in addition to the work that took place in Jamaica. And IICA also worked with the University of Guelph, Dr. Sarah Mann, who conducted the initial literature review regarding the benefits of the SOP for the workers, which is all part of the research body of work that IICA has been doing. So, so some work has been done, and it's a good start, but a lot more IICA wants to do, and CARC would like to be a part of that, supporting the occupational development for the workers. And so, and then that'll be the next phase, which IICA is looking for funding with, and CARC would like to help support as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. Thanks for helping out. And Don, maybe we'll speak in the break because maybe there's room for some collaboration on that front. I think we have used up our time for questions, but if there's any one burning question, we'll take it. Okay. And is there one? Oh, sorry, Ambassador. My apologies.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burnett. My name is Carlos Jimenez. I'm the ambassador of Guatemala here in Canada. Actually, profiting from the work of origin from Mrs. Lindsay Bibi, I would like to ask a question that has been born in my mind. CFIA is putting in place a new set of regulations for 1919 about food safety. I would like to know when we can get in knowledge of these new regulations, because it will, of course, make a big impact in our exports. And I am also very much interested in the development of the seasonal workers, because Guatemala has been providing not as many as Mexico and Jamaica, but we have been the third source of seasonal workers for the Canadian program. And I would like to know, of course, about the future of this program, especially this new possibility of combining the work here in Canada and the work that some workers can do, or some entrepreneurs can do to supply products when there is no, the season is not, because of the winter, the season is not in operation here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay, do you want to come and answer? I know I see Rolf here, and we had done, as Lindsay pointed out, we had done some sessions before with just the Act. Now the regs are going to be unveiled as of January 2019, and this is what's so great about IICA. We have all our partners here, so I can call on Rolf to answer that one.
The regulations come into force mid-January of 2019, and as Adia has mentioned, we have done a number of webinars with IICA member countries on the Act itself. Now that the regs are going to be shortly in place, we will be doing webinars with IICA. We're in discussion now with IICA with regard to doing further webinars on the SFCRs, and there is an outreach program at the agency where IICA's partnership with us is part of that outreach program. So we're hoping, that we can make it as easy as possible for exporters in the Americas to learn about the new regs and whether there is an impact on them or not.
Thanks, Rolf. And I think Lindsay had mentioned we actually had an in-house sharing of the Act, and we're in active discussion with CFIA to look at another round of sharing information on the Safe Food for Canadians regulations. So we'll be in touch with you and members of the diplomatic corps as we do the in-person one, the in-house one. And then we also do webinars for countries, so you can link in with your countries and your agricultural and industry persons in the countries so they know what to look for. In terms of the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program, we can talk afterwards. I can also share with you, there's a I mean, the Mexican I'm telling you about, he's like a rock star in his community because he has come back and he has employed persons and he's now able to meet the Canadian standards because he worked there. He knows how to do it. So we could share that case with you, and then we can talk, in the break to see how you could benefit from that. Okay? All right. So let us move on. So we have agricultural health and food safety being 50%. I'm seeing just 28 persons though. Come on, guys, download the app, Slido. It's on your tables. Download the app. And so we can get a good, representation. But it is showing clearly here that agricultural health and food safety, we are concerned about how, food in terms of trade and how safe it is. International trade and regional integration, 25%. Climate change and natural resource and risk management, 21%. Thank you so much for doing that that poll. And we're gonna, I left my notes, but we're gonna go straight now into the presentation on the medium-term plan. Thanks. So we call it a medium-term plan, mainly because, you have the strategic plan, which is a longer one, and IICA operates on 4-year programming periods called medium terms. In July, and the Director General mentioned this, the medium-term plan, the new medium-term plan was approved by the Executive Committee of IICA, and Canada sits on the Executive Committee this year. And so Canada was one of the 9 countries that endorsed the plan. And it's a plan that, as I mentioned before, came from all the countries. The inputs are right there. So without any further ado, I'm going to just go through the medium-term plan. And for those newcomers, just to mention that IICA, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture, is the body in the Americas that has a mandate for promoting sustainable, productive, and competitive agriculture. So we're like the FAO, and I'm sure all of you know about the FAO, but just for the Americas, for all the countries in the Americas. So we have offices in 34 member states from Canada all the way down south, and we have offices in Central America, the Caribbean, all the Caribbean countries. And so you see the regional, we have regional nodes, northern region, central region, etc. And we operate as one single IICA. And you know that there will be challenges trying to meet all the expectations based on that. How we are financed, typically I don't give out this information, but I've been getting so many questions, I said, okay. It's an accountability seminar. Okay, so typically we get total quota from all the countries, pay a quota towards IICA. Lindsay mentioned that Canada is the 3rd highest after the United States and Brazil. 2017, 30 million, 2018, 29. You see the trend. For Canada, Canada's contribution to the IICA quota system is $3.1 million, and external project execution, $140 million in 2017 and 140.7, a little bit more in 2018. And then when we do projects, we have what is called the indirect recovery of indirect costs, and that was about $10 million. So what I'm showing here is that the quota that we receive from all the countries is less than 40% of what we actually use to do what we have to do, and that's the point of this. As any institute that has been around for so long, we have been around for 75 years, 45 in Canada, a little over 45 in Canada. We have some strengths. And part of our strengths is the experience that we have in the countries, on the ground, working with small farmers, working with regulators, working with policymakers, you name it. We have a finger on the pulse. We have experience in capacity building, in the countries and honed towards the needs of our Latin American group. And because we're pretty small in the scheme of things, we're nimble, we respond very quickly. And that is part of the strength of IICA. And as all organizations, we have a few constraints. We have a broad mandate, extremely broad, trying to ensure productive, sustainable, and competitive agriculture for very small island states to very large developed countries. How do we meet the needs of all of these? A very broad mandate. And with the pressures that agriculture is and food security is under. Coordinate with other ministries. As you know, agriculture is not in a package put one side. Agriculture mainstreams with health, with the environment, with industry. So more and more the conversation has to take place with several other ministries. And the expectations, because we have been delivering so well, all the countries expect us to deliver as soon as they have a challenge or opportunity or priority identified. So there's a diverse range of demands and expectations, and we still have limited resources and diminishing resources. So the medium-term plan was developed, and I mentioned before, through consultations. And one important note that the Director General pointed out was the fact that it is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. And you see here, there are 4 strategic objectives for the medium-term plan, and they're all aligned with, we try to look at which of the Sustainable Development Goals, their synergies. So one strategic goal speaks to the economic growth and sustainable development, another to the well-being of all rural dwellers. Third, international and regional trade. And fourth, of course, resilience of rural areas and the agri-food systems to extreme events. So these are the 4 strategic objectives in the medium-term plan, and we can share the link to on our website, and you can get the full document, which is 100 pages long. But we have a shortened synopsis of the medium-term plan. But there are several features I want to just point out very quickly. It focuses on the Institute being a knowledge broker. So our business is knowledge management, sharing knowledge, ensuring the proper use of knowledge and innovations. Another area that, and again the Director General spoke to it, was the issue of partnerships and strategic alliances. The Institute has forged alliances at various levels, and because the new medium-term plan is premised off looking at delivery from regional nodes, our directorate has signed agreements with, for example, CARICOM and CAS in the Central American belt, in the Andean region. So we're now looking at mechanisms to have a multiplier effect in terms of the delivery of our services. Okay, next. There are 5 main program areas that have been identified for us to work on over the next 4 years. Bioeconomy and production development, territorial development and family farming, which is very, very important in the Latin American and Caribbean region, international trade and regional integration, climate change, natural resource and risk management, and of course, agricultural health, safety, and food quality. Very, very importantly, the Institute is taking an interdisciplinary approach and trying to, because a lot of these are cross-cutting issues, a lot of them overlapping, but very, very importantly, there are 2 blocks that will have specific parameters that we're keeping in mind as we deliver the different programs. One is gender and youth, and the other is innovation and technology. And I'm just going to quickly go through each one. So here, for the bioeconomy and production development, the objective here is to increase agricultural. It aligns to the objective that we spoke about before in terms of economic growth and sustainable development. And we have two main lines of action in terms of our action plan. And this is helping countries to prepare, to review and update their policies so that innovations can flourish, and fostering production development based on the bioeconomy production chains. So we're looking at opportunities to actually help the Latin American Caribbean region that tend to be very rich in biodiversity to optimize the bioeconomy. Territorial development and family farming, of course, the objective to improve the well-being of rural dwellers, and the lines of action to drive an inclusive development model where rurality plays a central role. We're looking at migration, we're looking at entrepreneurial activities, we're looking at the youth, women. So this is part of the considerations for this program. Promoting provision of productive assets and public services, which oftentimes are lacking in rural areas and contribute to the migration. Next. International trade and regional integration. Here, improving international and regional trade. And of course, in terms of the action plan, we're promoting agri-food trade. And we have been doing this for many years, especially our delegation in Canada. Look at building capacity in countries to meet Canadian standards and looking at international standards through Codex and other international guidelines and how to help countries to be able to meet these. Supporting regional integration processes and the articulation of trade policy. And of course, IICA has what is called a strategic platform, strategic analysis platform, where we'll have that hub and act as a reference point for information on trade agreements. And I might have to lean on Aaron to help us with some of his skills there. Next. Climate change, natural resource and risk management, increasing resilience of rural areas and the agri-food system to shocks. And we're taking an approach which is more looking at adaptation to climate change. But here, contributing to capacity building for development of conceptual frameworks and implementation of policies. And in many of the countries and in the sub-regions, there are approaches that can be shared and approaches that have worked, that we, over the last medium-term plan, we have gained some lessons that we want to share. Promoting technical policy dialogue and implementation of technical cooperation. Next. Agricultural health and food safety, and this is the area that, as you saw from the poll, most of us are saying that this is the area that resonates for our Canadian stakeholders. We want to know that we're having safe food. So it's strengthening institutions in the region in terms of their agricultural health and food safety systems, harmonizing and modernizing their food standards and safety standards, food safety standards, and looking at sanitary and phytosanitary challenges and trying to address these. Two cross-cutting areas. Who would have thought? In the Americas, the combined population of young persons, and that's between 15 and 24, as well as females, it's almost 1 billion persons. It's 3/4 billion, I'm stretching it. 3/4 billion persons. It's a big cohort. And if we recognize that, we have to have special programs that will address their needs. We have 20% of these persons living in rural areas, and we spoke about some of the challenges that the rural areas were facing, and the fact that we have this migration taking place. And the Institute produces, and we have a copy on the table there, a report that looks at agriculture in the Latin American and Caribbean region from year to year. And one of the points that the document showed in terms of looking at objective data was the fact that inequity exists at so many levels: economic, social, development, and so we really have our job cut out for us. Innovation and technology are another of the cross-cutting issues, and of course we have a toolbox. We have agrobiotechnology, we have agroecology, we have ICT, information and communication technologies, robotics, etc. But very important in this scheme of things is the issue of engaging with the private sector, looking at public-private partnerships. So, how are we going to do what we have to do? What's the process we can use as an institute? So our medium-term plan has identified a menu of processes that can be used, scenarios for development strategies, looking at external resource mobilization, and we are all becoming experts at that. Mobilizing human and knowledge support, horizontal cooperation, and the Director General spoke about that. Opportunities for South-South cooperation. And would you believe that in our discussion with some of our members of diplomatic corps here, we see opportunities where in Canada we can help to catalyze South-South cooperation, because we have seen where Canadian missions here say, oh, we have a strength in this area, and we think, our government will be willing to help this country who's weak in that area. So we can act as a catalyst right here to stimulate South-South, but of course there's also opportunity for North-South cooperation. And some of the mechanisms, public policies, and we have some experience with that, and some of you were involved in our exercise a couple of years ago where we looked at the agricultural policy in several countries and how they were changing in response to the development goals. Capacity building, private dialogue and collaboration, of course, also technical political fora and dialogue. Lindsay mentioned, we recently experimented in one of these lobby days. So there are opportunities to, really share and share information of the role of agriculture and how we could respond to some of the challenges. Okay, so what is our next step? I'm almost done. What is our next step? Our next step in all the countries, once we have our medium-term plan approved, we now need to move to the country level. We now need to make sure that in the same way that we inform the medium-term plan, that we inform the strategy for the country. What Canada will be focusing on is different from what a Chile would focus on, for example, or a Guyana would focus on. So we need to speak with our stakeholders, which include all of you here. We have the diplomatic corps. We also have members of government. We have NGOs, private sector. We need to know, what do you think we should really be addressing from a Canadian delegation standpoint? And this would help to inform our country strategy. We then will prepare a short-term one for next year while we hone the longer-term one. So communication is open. We are open to communication even after this meeting. We had a consultation a few weeks ago with some select persons representing academia, government, private sector, NGOs, and we'll be having regional consultation, but this one is very, very important, and I want you to take the opportunity as we move into the next session to share your thoughts, to help us in customizing a strategy for Canada. So, I want to thank you and invite your questions. Again, while you think of your questions, I think we have one last poll, right? I think we have one last poll. While you think of your questions, you'll also just answer the poll. The poll question. Any questions on the medium-term plan? Okay, the poll question. How should Canada deliver its program? Oh, you are on the ball now. Okay, how should Canada deliver its programs? And we have some options there, so try and complete that. Did I see a hand somewhere? Kim? No, you're just scratching your nose. Okay. Okay, just 13 have responded. So, colleagues, you have been tremendous. You have been great so far. You have been pretty quiet, but you're going to move into the mode now where you're going to be talking. And I hope that I can count on you for really, really participating in an active way. We really value your input and your perspectives. You're coming from different perspectives and agendas, and we think that this will help to strengthen our program as we develop it.
Okay, we're ready to go. So here's what we're going to do right now. Your facilitators, they're all ambassadors for you for a few minutes. Then we'll let you loose. My name is David McInnes, by the way, and I've been doing some work with IICA, and a delight to have the opportunity to help IICA develop its strategic plan and business planning process. So what we're going to do is we wanted to actually cut your group a little short because we want to intensify the ideas. We're going to go through a discussion here about your priority ideas, what can enable or hinder your objective. And then we'll open up the discussion to you. So if you feel that there was a point that you'd like to add or even take some issue with what was discussed, that's fair game. And we will wrap up either before or at 11:45. And Audia will take quarter to 12. We're going to be here for 24 hours. We're really going to go through this. We're not going to miss an idea, that's for sure. Okay. So we have 2 microphones. I'm wondering where's the other mic? Okay. So let's start. We'll just do it in order of the group first, and then we'll open it up a bit. But very shortly, Daryl, just make sure, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself, and then what's a couple of ideas that came up at your table. And we're going to keep these really short, by the way.
Excellent. Hello? Oh, great. So good morning, everyone. I'm Daryl Nearing. I was the moderator for Table 1, the table of rock stars and experts over here on economic growth and sustainable development. We had a really useful, a terrific conversation, a little unstructured, so coming up with exactly 2 or 3 of things that help and then 2 or 3 that hinder. We got there, I think. So if I make a mistake or bring up something that we didn't talk about, please jump in. First one I'll share was a suggestion on, let me just find my notes here, on finding, and they do exist, agricultural practices that are also smart environmental practices. And the one specific example was used from Canada with regard to zero-till agriculture, where farmers will use less inputs or less activity because the land will not be tilled, and as a result, carbon is sequestered, more carbon, apparently 10 times more carbon, is sequestered in the roots of the plants. And for farmers, they make more money because they have to, there's less required work for them to do, and the environment benefits as well. We know that there are quite a few other ideas out there. One I'm familiar with is intercropping, and the point is that there are a lot of ways to introduce new agricultural practices that are good for the bottom line as well as the environment, and just to share more information about that. Second kind of activity we thought was worth looking into was building capacity, if I can characterize it like this, building capacity for small farmers to better integrate or better get involved with trade and with markets. So this is everything from capacity building for them to produce more food definitely spoke a lot about the information sharing to better understand how to comply with standards, regulatory practices. I'm sure many other things, even like packaging, would be a consideration. And this was, I think we spoke about this a little bit before our breakout sessions, but definitely saw a lot of value in that work. We also spoke a lot about the following up on the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program and the idea of how information that first that companies in Canada can share practices, consciously help build knowledge, share knowledge, et cetera, with workers who come from other countries in the Americas to Canada, and then also enable them to return to their home countries and share this expertise and experience. I think that was another area we thought was worth looking into. One of the other topics I'll share, this is the last thing I'll share on the three things that help. One of the other topics I'll share was we repeatedly spoke about ways for workers to work together. Cooperatives were mentioned. We really spoke a lot about the importance of women. This came up by several of the participants. The idea that family farmers are often led by women in Latin America and the Caribbean, and they have an essential role to play in all of these activities. So I'll turn now.
One idea on what might hinder some of the progress that you've outlined.
That's exactly where I was going to turn.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent.
Brilliant. We really kind of, this was a lot less structured. I think some of our thinking was almost these ideas in reverse. A hindrance would be things like the absence of support, capacity building, information sharing, and development assistance from Canada to the region to help them be able to access Canadian markets, understand our regulatory systems, or even build their own capacities. I think that was something was really underlined. Another, I'm starting to run at the end of my notes now. Another idea was that we also spoke about the importance of working multilaterally. The idea that the IICA is really a tool for the multilateral side as opposed to working bilaterally, that predictable trade managed in a multilateral way was a very positive situation, and the reverse of that would be a real hindrance, absolutely. My mouth is dry. I think I've exhausted all my remarks. Anything else from the table?
Well, before we open up to the table, Daryl,
sorry, David.
We'll hold your suggestions. Dorian, thank you very much, Daryl. Dorian, could you introduce yourself and just give an update on what you discussed?
Hi, I'm Dorian Rowan Campbell. Half of my life is in Canada, the rest is in Jamaica, where I'm an organic farmer. You're all invited if you want to be up 4,000 feet in the Blue Mountains. I welcome you. And I work a lot with rural farmers and small communities. Our group started with what prevents. And we felt that dialogue and policy dialogue and policymakers really investing in consultation and dialogue are the two main blocks to getting the issues which affect rural areas listened to and attended to. And one of our members said, and it's not just outside of Canada, the ruling from the Alberta Supreme Court has just said that the government of Canada doesn't have to consult with Indigenous native populations when whatever they're deciding is going to affect their rights and their traditional holdings. So obviously, something about dialogue and consultation is lacking and leaves our rural whole system behind. So we thought that technology is important, that knowledge is important, but that we have to have some ways of harnessing traditional knowledge and getting it recognized. So we want to look at identifying local knowledge, sharing that, particularly with young people, so they begin to understand the value of their communities instead of out-migration. And we thought that what we could do is to come up with a set of toolboxes. And we thought about the technology because so many people don't read, that if we can get something done in a video or get something done just on a computer that they can look at or on a phone that they can look at. It's a way of reaching them. One example was that women in Guyana are actually looking at developing ways of controlling erosion along the coast. And as they plant, they're feeding the bees. So they now have a honey industry. Now this is because they understand their biodiversity, they understand their local resources. So we thought that one of the toolboxes could be, how do you help rural communities identify the biodiversity and resources that are at hand, and that therefore they can build into an industry, and eventually, because rural development links to every single one of the groups here, trade, economics, you feed into the wider system. In our concern about the outmigration of skills, largely unemployed young males, but also educated women. So we're getting skilled women leaving communities and unskilled young men either leaving the communities or simply hanging around. We felt that history in organizations like 4-H had proven that it really harnessed a lot of skills, knowledge, and helped people anchor themselves in the community, and that there might be a way to build on that as a starting point to keep people in the regions. And you'd also need to invest in the Caribbean and probably in the rest of the region. There's a lot of untapped land or land that's been left fallow, that's left properties that people haven't used but are actually fruited. How can you use these and build economic assets from them? My writing is terrible.
What we could do is come back and bring out another idea after a bit, if you like, Dorian.
I think the other issue is they felt that in Canada, one of the successes of Canadian government working with farmers is in kind of joint ventures and helping with risk management. And that in rural areas, it's very, very important that farmers feel that they have support, which is going to be there for them when they're faced with hurricanes, with floods, and systems need to be in place to do that. I know that I personally have trigger insurance. It's very low-cost insurance, but if there is a hurricane that's at a certain level, I know I'm covered. If there's flooding, I know I'm covered. And it needs to be expanded so that people understand the value of this and understand that they can be covered. And this is a public-private partnership, this insurance that I get.
Well, that's great. At the risk of trying to summarize these two, I won't. But one theme, smart agriculture, information sharing is critical as we go forward to address these really complex issues. Next, we're going to go to Kim.
Good morning, or it's still morning, I guess.
Still morning.
We had a very interesting group, very dynamic. You talked about yours being a rock star group. I think ours were superstars, but we had some really interesting ideas. And one of the challenges that when we were addressing the topic was the fact that trade within the region was lower than any other region. And this was one of the challenges that we wanted to address. And the first thing that came out is it's because we all produce the same thing. We're competitors in this market, so we're not going to trade with ourselves with the same product. So one of the ideas is, well, how do we avoid that? What are ways that we can build on that? So one thought was perhaps we could look at diversifying our product. Instead of everybody growing the same thing, then look at ways that we could work together and say, okay, you focus on this product, I'll focus on that product. And this is a way that we could maybe be more, rather than competing against each other, we could work together. The other thing is diversifying into different markets. The U.S. is obviously a big market for a lot of us, and that was something that Mexico talked about with some of the challenges that have come up recently there. They're looking at building markets elsewhere. They're getting free trade agreements, new free trade agreements. They're looking at other places that they can work with. And Guatemala is doing the same thing. Guatemala has opportunities with Canada. So there's opportunities through that. We talked about the importance of meeting the criteria for these trade agreements. There's different barriers, there's different regulations that they need to have training on. They need to understand of what are these the rules and regulations for getting into these markets, because the further abroad you get, the more challenging it comes, because you have to make sure that you meet the criteria. The other thing was that when we try to get into these markets, there's a need for capacity building. So you need to have training on how you're going to get your product into this market. What are the standards? What are the SPS regulations? And so some of the groups have done some capacity building, some training on that. They've done some work in these markets. And one of the things that has come up is that everywhere that they go, when they get some of these smaller producers in a room and they show them what capacity, what are the rules that they need, they realize where they thought they were ready to export into another market, they realize what they were missing. They saw that, oh, I thought that, well, I have a really good product and I have a really good price, but if it doesn't meet all the standards and criteria and all the food safety, and they don't have HACCP and they don't even know what HACCP is, and there's a lot of that kind of capacity building that needs to be done in order to develop into that. The other thing is trade is a two-way street. That was a comment that I've heard more than once. This is something where if you're going to be building opportunities in a market, they're going to want to look at opportunities in your market as well. So these are other areas that we looked at. So some of the challenges of getting into that as well was communication. When a producer or when an exporter is trying to get into a market, trying to make a sale, you have to get communication. It has to be fast. It has to be available. If you can't answer what the buyer wants in a very 24-hour period or a very quick time, you're going to lose that sale. So that is another thing that's an important thing for these markets. So the diversification and the production, I think I've covered pretty much everything from our group. We had a really interesting discussion and a good broad representation from different sectors. So it was a super group.
Okay, well, thank you. So from a superstar group to Sherry, what would you like to share?
Oh my goodness, they were amazing. No, I got to say that at our table, we had a really interesting and eclectic mix of folks. So you had a business perspective, you had an academic perspective, you had cooperatives, you had the diplomatic perspective, then in trying to bring it all together was really quite fascinating. So I am going to try to pull that all together now. We looked at the issue of resilience in agriculture. And I think we started out by trying to think about what does this mean overall, because the description said in terms of climate change, but we had one person who felt very strongly, let's not just think about resilience in terms of climate change, which is very long term, even though it's happening now, but in some senses, when you're communicating with farmers, you have to be able to give them a sense of immediacy, what's happening now. And I'm going to start off by using an example from the Caribbean, right? When we're talking about resilience. Last year, we had Hurricanes Maria and Irma in the Caribbean. In Dominica, for example, 100% of their agricultural production was destroyed. Wow. So when we're talking about the issue of resilience and looking at this within the context of the Western Hemisphere, where we have such tremendous asymmetries in terms of the countries. You have Canada and the United States and Brazil and some others that are huge. And then you have small island developing states. You have areas where there are going to be impacts that when they occur will affect every aspect of production. And then you have other countries where it might be limited and localized, so the response might be very different. So I think one of the things that came out is, how do we look at this in a broader context, get input, not just filter information down, but get information coming in from all of the different sectors, including the rural sectors that we're talking about here so much, and making sure that we come up with solutions that can be inclusive and reach the majority of the people. So, looking at resilience in terms of protection, response, and recovery in face of long-term or acute changes, I think we came up with some suggestions that were very useful. This has come up several times already, but if I were to say one thing that came out that cropped up in every single recommendation was the idea and the recommendation for better, more effective, more consistent, more timely information sharing. That, I think, sort of underlay everything that we talked about. We talked about, of course, knowledge transfer, technology, and I'll get into all of those. But information sharing was key. And I mention that because there's also another aspect to information sharing, and some of it has to do with developing regional initiatives that allow us to get information out in a timely manner. There is, for example, as many of you know, in Central America, a program that's been on for some time, which looks at gathering geospatial and other data and sharing that so that farmers are aware and can begin doing more planning in terms of their agricultural production, harvesting, and it's also good for governments and policymakers to think about that. So having that information that's there, that's accessible. In Jamaica, which you probably know, I think there was a USAID project a couple of years ago, which developed a drought index so that farmers could have access to that. So being able to collect and disseminate the data and making sure that information is getting out to the people that need it. I think that was absolutely critical in terms of the recommendations. The second recommendation on the issue of technology, and this got very technical because we had some people there who know the technology very well in terms of digital agriculture and precision agriculture. These were two terms that I just learned today, and perhaps some of you will be learning them for the first time. So, digital agriculture, which of course looks at the whole idea of being able to get specific information over time, whether it's monitoring the soil, so you know what you're dealing with. And for us in the Caribbean, this is absolutely critical. One of the things that we're facing now, as many of you would probably know, is with rising oceans, we're having more salinity encroaching. So the soil salinity that's increasing and also impacting agriculture. So the digital agriculture idea, being able to monitor in real time and provide baseline information and be able to track trends as they happen, and then respond to that in a timely manner, which would assist resilience. The other part of the technology, which was precision agriculture. And precision agriculture was a little bit more complicated and to kind of explain, but it really talks about tools and techniques that can help with production, access to finance, insurance, a very broad and comprehensive approach. So that was also discussed.
Could we just wrap up, because we're going to move to Santiago, and then we'll come back to some of the points.
And so then, if you want to know a hindrance, one of the things that we talked about, because we have all of these amazing ideas, but how do we make it so that this is inclusive and reaching the populations, particularly in remote rural areas where agriculture is the mainstay, and helping them do that. And we had somebody at our table who came up with the idea, particularly for Latin America, of using cooperatives, which are very strong in the region, as you would know. And that is something that we could perhaps look at in terms of working with to help advance some of these ideas.
Thank you. A lot of discussion clearly at the table.
Thank
Santiago.
You. We didn't have any rock star. We were with IICA Got Talent in this table. You asked us for a couple of ideas. We have 7, but some of them, as you mentioned, who is missing in the discussion, and we took a little bit probably a value change approach. Try to look at the whole spectrum of agriculture, and the first ones that we are missing are the farmers that we don't reach. It's easy to engage with the union farmers, the cooperatives, but most of the small farmers are not, they don't even know what IICA means, or who they are, or who is FAO. And they need to be at the table, because those farmers are in many cases women, and those farmers are youth, and those two aspects need to be on the table. The other one that we were discussing on the public sector, of course, more integrated, is not only agriculture, it's other departments that should be here. But it was very interesting discussion about where things happen in agriculture, and they happen at the urban level, they happen at the provincial level, municipalities, and how sometimes connections between provincials and provinces and some of the territories in other areas of the continent need to be on the table, because it's not only at the minister level for many of the places that we work. We are talking of the private sector, and this discussion was very interesting on two levels. One, private sector is farmers, and farmers are the first private sector that we know as a civilization, and how we move farmers and those small farmers that we were talking to be business, and the other elements, non-traditional agriculture private sector, the investments and the investors we are talking about. You were talking about the insurance, access to credit, the finance sectors. They need to be on the table, and exporters. Next one, academia. In academia, of course, we have many of the researchers. We, from IDRC also, we were working on the research, connecting researchers from global south to global north, south-south. But there was a very interesting discussion about the role of academia on training the new generation of agronomists. And we go back to the idea of youth in an aging population of farming across the Americas, so actually across the globe, and how we engage and how we bring those new agronomists to the discussions ASAP, and not when they are already in the end of their careers. And then the other, some of the academia that are not the traditional suspects. I mean, the social science, the economists, the climate change science, etc. And finally, consumers. We don't have consumers in any of the discussions that we have globally on food systems. We have all of us, we know each other, but actually the main agents of change are going to be consumers. How we bring agriculture to the table of the discussion, not only to the table of feeding, or table of discussion, not only with this bad news. We bring agriculture to the news when we have, I don't know, some food safety issues. And in that sense, we were talking about, do we need to engage more with media, and not only with the traditional media, but the more mass media to have the discussion.
Thank you, very, very helpful. So right now, you are now the IICA Canada Board of Directors. And poor Audia is sitting there, she doesn't know I was going to do this. You are now going to agree on one thing Audia should do for January based on all of these ideas. What thing should she and her team do to try to weave through? There were some excellent ideas, there's some common themes. What should Audia focus in on? You know that resources are slim. They support dialogues, facilitate learning, fund research. What would be the idea as a board of directors for Audia and IICA Canada? Anybody?
Oh, I have the mic, so I went to...
Santiago has the mic, so...
I went to use it. I think there's an element of future that an organization such as IICA can or should play a role. And by future, I mean there's, I think, two critical elements that really panic me as a board of directors of an agricultural organization. One is climate change, and we were talking about the importance of traditional agriculture, the smallholders. Many of the traditional coping mechanisms are not anymore useful in a new environment. And we need to respond to that, and we need to bring the gap of the new agriculture. We were talking about the nanotechnologies and the, so that's one. And the other one that really is worrying me is the aging population. We were talking at our table, nobody wants to be a farmer, and no farmer wants their kids to be farmers.
So just, I'm just going to hand the mic down here, and when I think of what Sherry was saying on agricultural resilience, Would you agree with Santiago's first idea that should the first discussion or dialogue that Audie and her team hold is on climate change and how to deal with that, or do you disagree?
Well, of course, I bring a certain bit of bias because I'm from the Caribbean. That is front and center for us right now. As I said to people, this for us is not an academic exercise because we're living it. So absolutely, I would want to agree with that. But I would add, and this picks up on something that Santiago said in his initial presentation, and that is that we've got to get our populations interested and excited and about this and have buy-in and want to be involved. And I think a key part to that is reaching the youth. Using social media and other forms, if you get that wellspring coming up, then these ideas that we're trying to filter out, that will then make the difference. But really, we've got to get the population.
It's very interesting. Both of you agreed on the same point, but you mentioned an aging society. You mentioned youth. So the demographic human component and connecting with society seems to be, whatever the demographic is, very, very interesting. Other thoughts as a board of directors? What's the one idea that Adia should focus in on?
Well, I think some of the work that she's already doing is obviously in the right direction. And one of the things that I've seen IICA do is capacity building and bringing people together and missions and putting these kind of trade shows or taking these small producers and training them on how to get ready to export. Before you even start to export, they need to do it small. So they need to learn how to sell in their own regions before they start to go abroad. So those baby steps is the type of work that needs to be focused on, and I think it works in with what IICA is already doing.
Okay. Dorian?
A slightly different spin, but the same issues. When you're looking at, as we were thinking, from rural development, you're talking about resilience, but not just resilience to climate change. It means survival on a daily basis, survival daily on your farm, being able to trade, being able to grow, being able to sell, being able to produce effectively. And I think that with the outmigration that we're seeing of skilled people and the retention of only those who really don't have an interest in agriculture, we do need to focus on youth, and we do need to focus on women. Women are the ones who, wherever I work in the world, I find are the ones who are talking about sustainability on their farms and want to learn more. So we need to be able to reach the youth. And I find that where the youth are engaged is in technology. They're the ones who are participating in the agri-hacks, in the agri-technologies, and so we have to use that to bring them in. And the second aspect of what we have to do, we have to engage consumers. We need our consumers to be more aware and therefore more demanding.
Thank you very much, Dorian. Daryl?
I've got a remark that is, it's going from more of a diagnostic to more of a practical kind of point. I'm conscious that IICA has country offices with experts such as Adia in every one of the member states. And also in many of the countries, Canada has development officers in the same capitals whose role it is to manage Canadian development assistance and try to address many of the topics we're just talking about. And I would just encourage, if there's a way we can foster a dialogue between those two parties who may be within a phone call away, that especially for several countries that are key recipients of development assistance from Canada, like Haiti, Guatemala, and there are others, this could be a real constructive step.
Thank you very much. So you are the group, the audience, you are now the advisors to the board of directors. Keep that going a little bit more. Beat that one down. Is there something that you talked about at your table that you really feel strongly that was, I think the group of five did an incredible job capturing and summarizing, but is there something on your mind? Something that you'd like to add, something that perhaps was missed a little bit? Yes, sir. There's a microphone, if you wouldn't mind, just so everyone can hear. There's one just behind you.
I would like to add that, we were discussing about the difficulties to exchange products within some areas. Transport facilities are very important because one of our problems, talking about Guatemala, for instance, half of our trade with Canada comes through brokers in Miami because of the lack of transport facilities. We are trying to solve this problem, but I think that's an important key.
Thank you very much. Before we have any response, are there any, perhaps if there's any other thoughts, observations, or questions that anyone would like to share? So your facilitators did an outstanding job, unanimity at every table. That's quite an accomplishment. Kim, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, if I could just add a little bit to what was that, and you and I had talked about that just before this meeting started, is you're selling coffee from Jamaica and you're sending it by mail, by UPS, and it's going through the US and you're having some challenges with that. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be, I mean, within some of these smaller regions, to consolidate the shipments and to get products abroad, there's got to be a better way than sending it by mail. And so I think that's something that really could be addressed at this level.
It's not just sending it by mail, because if you're doing you probably need to send it by mail because it's a small amount. But the problem is that when you are going from the Caribbean to Canada, the intervening point is the US, which then shreds the stuff that's coming to Canada and says they have the right to open anything and do anything that they want. So we're not protected in sending produce to Canada. I don't care if Canada Customs does it. I do care if it's done in the US.
Santiago, do you want to add something? Thank you.
No, I think that's actually a critical element. The last year's report of IFPRI in the state of food policy actually looks at the impact of anti-globalization in the global food security market, and I really recommend to go to that document because it really, the level of, the impact of trade and lack of trade in not only markets, but in global food security is going to be one of the critical elements in the next years.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Because we are going to wrap up very, very shortly. Okay, so I'm going to ask our board of directors here, starting with Daryl, okay? 3 words. 3 words, and then we're going to go right down here, write down what captures from you the key learning or idea from all the thinking and discussion. 3 words. What captures? Daryl, what do you think? Oh, here you go.
3 words, this is a tricky one. I guess the 3 that the first one popped into my head really quickly, opportunity. That there is, I'll just keep to the 3 words. I can elaborate later. Opportunity, communication, and I don't have really a single word to kind of express the next one, but the point is that it's technical.
Okay. Okay. Dorian. That's okay. There were three bolded words in that. That works. Okay, Dorian.
Can I do it in French? It might be easier. Okay. Access, dialogue, communication.
Okay. Kim.
Diversification, capacity building, and barriers.
Thank you. Sherry.
Innovation, communication, inclusion.
Santiago.
I always told you, as an Spaniard, cannot do anything in 3 words. I will say only one, connect. Connect the farmers, connect the consumers, connect the private sector, connect the researchers, connect the markets.
That was 5 words, but it was all the same one. Thank you very much, everyone. Please give us a hand to our panel. Thank you to all of you. Audio, you're going to wrap up for us, and thank you for helping us out today.
Thank you so much to the rock stars, the amazing. What was yours again, Santiago? Got Talent. Okay, Canada got IICA Got Talent. Yeah, the salt of the earth. No. So, and I want to also thank David for doing such a great job in terms of facilitating the discussion. In this very short time, in what, 2.5 hours, you have been a tremendous support to us and to our work program. So I just have a few closing remarks, if you'll allow me. And my board gave me some, some work. So, based on the discussion we just heard, and I like how David put a board together, and I may just be calling on you guys as my advisors to not just tell me what to do, but help me, you know, with the process of doing it. But I agree with a lot of what has been said, and a common theme that each of you and the groups echoed was that of communication and knowledge sharing, knowledge and information sharing. And IICA, as I mentioned, this is part of what we do, and in the new medium-term plan, it has been refocused our attention in terms of the importance of sharing information. And the delegation in Canada will certainly be taking advice from what you just discussed this morning and moving that forward. So you are going to be hearing more about webinars, about information sessions such as these, maybe smaller ones, more targeted, looking at specific topics and themes, challenges, as well as opportunities. The youth, gender and youth. That we're so excited to see this being specifically targeted in our plan, because we know that these are areas that resonate well in Canada. And so we're looking, and I'm sorry our 4-H person isn't here, we're looking at forging new alliances. We already have one with 4-H, but others to knock heads and brainstorm a bit more about how to engage the youth. In the Caribbean, there are several competitions using technologies, developing apps, and they're doing amazing things in collaboration with other countries, such as in the African region, in the Pacific. And so we can learn from some of these exercises. And so the whole issue of linking, addressing the youth and getting them excited is something that we are committed to. Linking new agriculture with traditional knowledge and practices. Again, I think that's an excellent area. It ties in, I think, with the whole issue of the bioeconomy, although when we did the poll, you notice that that wasn't highly ranked. But looking at the rural territories and engagement at the rural level, looking at your biodiversity and how we could link all of that, get the youth excited about using some of what is there on the ground, and the practices, linking that with some of the current practices. So all in all, I think we have, and bringing the consumers. When we do our fora, we have to remember the consumers. So I thank you for that. So all in all, I think this has been a really, really, really useful session for us. I want to keep the conversation going, because I think you are interested in seeing how we perform and how we unveil what the strategy is going to be looking like. I just wanted to also underscore the fact that the Canadian FIAP, the Feminist International Assistance Policy, was shared with our Director General when he came earlier this year, and you can see that it is reflected in our medium-term plan, and we expect to engage a lot more with Global Affairs Canada and with our development partners as we try to address some of the imperatives in the FIAP. At this time, I want to acknowledge the assistance of various players who helped to make today possible. Of course, my fantastic 4. Please give them a round of applause. Our audiovisual providers, Baldwin and Collaborate Video. And we should have asked your permission, but we're doing a little video of the morning's discussion, and we'll make that available on our website, especially the rich discussion that we had on the panel. I want to thank David again for his, and David's work started much before this session here. He's a tremendous person to brainstorm and to help to get some of these ideas unearthed. So thank you, David, for the excellent moderation, for the panel that helped to get the discussions going at the tables. I want to thank each of you. Wow. Yes, and you notice every one of them were excellent. I mean, I couldn't have done a better job at selecting the panelists. We want to thank the providers of the space here, DoubleTree Hotel, and I want to bring your attention in closing to the fact that next week, I think it's on Monday, October 15th, is actually the United Nations Day of Rural Women. Okay, and it is just what, 4 days, 5 days time, and we're having this discussion here, and I think it was mentioned several times in the discussion, the role of the rural woman. IICA has a long history working with rural women, and I have to take Santiago aside after this session and tell him how much work we've been doing with women and youth. We have been working, we have various groups organized and they meet on a regular basis, rural women as well as youth in the Caribbean and Latin America. But IICA felt moved this year to commemorate the celebration of United Nations Day of Rural Women in a special way. And I'm going to ask that the slideshow be shown at this time, which, you know, we're talking about partnerships, and IICA is open to all types of partnerships. And in this case, we partnered with none less than Vogue. Vogue magazine. We partnered with Vogue to feature, can you see with all this light? Because these are some fantastic women from across the Caribbean and Latin America. I think they selected 4 countries and featured women, rural women, women playing a role in agriculture and rural development across the Americas. So that is in a special edition of Vogue, which is now out. So this is something that IICA worked on with Vogue, and we're really proud of it. We also want to note that we will be launching on the 16th, that is October 16th, the day after the International Day of Rural Women, a publication called Warriors, Rural Women Around the World, 28 Enlightened Voices. And this is a publication prepared by IICA, and it's a brainchild of our new Director General that I think the seed was planted when he came here to Canada and heard about the FIAP. So this year we'll be, on Tuesday we'll be launching this publication. If you're interested in participating in the launch, which will take place in Costa Rica, you can see either Gloria, where's Gloria? Gloria or Isabel during the lunch break. We can give you the link. I think it's on your program too. But you also, if you want to come to our office and fellowship with us some more, and we can have a chat while we discuss the issues. There's a program for the launch followed by a short reception at our office. If you are able to come, please let us know. If you just want the link to be able to log on, you can let us know too. So at this time, I want to thank you all for your attention. Thank you for your participation. And I think this time we really got persons talking around the tables, which is great. We want to ask you to continue the conversation over lunch, so please stay with us and have a bite. We have some gifts that when you're leaving, please take one. They're at the door. And please keep close to us. We'll be continuing to communicate through our newsletters and our usual sessions. But get ready. We're going to be definitely doing a lot more consultations such as this and discussions such as this based on your recommendations. Thank you so much again, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.